right. And welcome back to the Fortitude podcast.
Woohoo!
We are so excited for this. Yeah. My dad's was an English teacher in high school, as you can see. But we're so excited for this podcast because we have a very special guest on, and we're going to be talking about a subject matter that I'm very passionate about. We did a whole podcast about it in our last season, and you can go and check that out if you want, but it was on porn and my struggles with porn. And this is a very special guest that we have on. I'll do a little intro for him, and then he will kind of share his story because it's a very powerful one, a very unique one. But he is a pastor. He's an author. He has a book out called 7 Lies That Will Ruin Your Life. And then he's also been married for 8 years, has 4 beautiful boys, and is a great father. But that is only part of his story.
You didn't say his name.
Oh, well, yes, I'm getting there. And his name is Joshua Broome.
Woohoo.
And we are so honored to have you on our podcast to talk about your life and your journey. And I've talked about pretty openly about my struggles with porn. I'm on the consumer side, and I know that you were on the other side of the porn industry for 6 years. And I'll let you kind of share your story of how you got into that industry, and we'll just kind of go from there, because that you have such a unique story, that how God is using you from the other side of that. But I want to kind of go back, if you will, to kind of share the beginnings of that, how you kind of got even into that industry in the first place.
Yeah, I think it's so important to kind of go back before, because a lot of people share their story, their testimony, and it's like there's the point of tension, or there's the climax of the story, and then there's restoration and all that good stuff. But I think more often than not, if we really peel back the onion and say, hey, why did I say yes to something that I should not have said yes to, or how did I get to a place where, I did this thing? You got to go way back to figure out, what was the thing in which was catalytic to you making that decision or seeing yourself in that way. But for me, I grew up in a small town in South Carolina, and my mom got pregnant with me at 15, had me at 16. And my dad lived in that town, and we're talking about super small town. I graduated with like 100 people. I think, yeah, there you go.
Yep.
And yeah,
same story.
So the deal. It's like, being from a small town, it only takes one person to know one thing about your life for everyone to know everything about your life. And, my mom, getting pregnant with me and having me at an early age, and me growing up without having a dad in my life, it might be normative in culture today, but it most certainly was not normative in, the city which I grew up in. So, I'm in this really small city, and my mom's working at a restaurant that is literally, there's these windows that are facing this convenience store and gas station. And the convenience store is called Rogers. And Roger was my grandfather. And my dad would go to that store sometimes. And, it was almost like this weird thing where I'm in this town and I'm this kid, and I know who my dad is, and I know where my dad is, and I know like where, my grandfather is. But I never have him in my life. And just the way that, attachment theory works, on a neurological basis, it's like the way that I form my understanding of emotions are contingent of, how I grew up and what was expressed to me, what was modeled to me, because we know what, more stuff is caught than it's taught. And what was caught by me was, my dad's across the street and he doesn't want anything to do with me. So the thought is, well, maybe there's something wrong with me. That's the way that, my brain was working. Your brain as a child, when you experience conflict, it's like, well, I have to resolve this, because if I don't, I'm just going to be, I'm going to go crazy about it. So I thought, okay, well, if he doesn't want to be in my life, it must be my fault. And if it's my fault, then maybe I'm the solution. And I thought, well, if I become a good enough student and if I do enough stuff and I get enough applause from other people, maybe that would mitigate the gap or the void in my life that was caused by my dad not being there.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, that was kind of the thing in which was catalytic for my behavior. And it's like, I'm living this way where I'm a great student, great athlete, and it's not a bad thing. But if you do a good thing for the wrong reason, it no longer is a good thing, because I was trying to really, manage an outcome. I thought, if I did something, I would feel something.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked for a moment, but just that's the way that, any addiction or any kind of problematic behavior works. And that if I think that if I have something I don't, I'll feel something I don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
It works for a moment, but it doesn't actually fill that void that you have.
Well, that target always moves too.
Yeah.
It's like when I make this amount of money, then I can finally, have peace and financial peace. And then you hit that number and it's like it's such a fleeting feeling. And that goes for like, I think that winning the Super Bowl and different things, you feel like you put it in your brain that it should feel a certain way, or like your life will look different once you hit this echelon. And then you hit it, and then you realize that is such a temporary kind of place that that you're in, and then you're just on to the next. And that's like we've talked pretty openly about kind of like being performance driven, achievement driven people, and how that is, it's good in one way where it's like, you have a lot of, I guess, ambition, and I think that can be used good. But if your identity is tied into your achievement, then you can really fall prey to never being enough and always wanting more and never really, I guess, being content in your life.
It's almost like the dichotomy of, we were created to create, but we find ourselves consuming more than we create. And by our consuming, our thought process or our worth is distorted. So I begin to think, if I do enough, I will feel as if I'm enough. And it's like, instead of me understanding, at the end of the day, it's like, man, because of Jesus Christ, I am a son or a daughter of the King of Kings, and he's for me and he's with me. And because of that, that's going to be the thing in which I create an identity out of.
Yeah.
Instead of me thinking that, my identity is going to be attached to how much I do, how much I have, or how many people think something of me. But I mean, that was kind of the thing driving me. And I think in addition to that, at 13, I saw pornography for the first time. And in my life, I never, outside of my mom, she was married for like just a few years, from like when I was like 7 to 10, really bad situation. But I never had any kind of model of intimacy. Even my grandparents, like, they were older, and my grandfather was like retired and fishing all the time. And they didn't sleep in the same room. He said it was because of his back or something. I don't know, but like they slept in separate rooms. So I never had a conversation by, an adult, specifically my parents, about here's what love, sex, and relationships and intimacy actually is. And, Romans 12:2 talks about you're either being conformed by the world or you're being transformed by the renewing of your mind. And for me, what the world taught me at 13 was when I saw pornography for the first time, I felt feelings that I didn't feel. And I felt, this cognitive dissonance of, I felt shame and intrigue simultaneously. It's like I wanted to look away, but I couldn't not look again. And that started to kind of paint the picture of what I thought, in that I was like, well, if I do what I see, I'll feel what I don't. And I started pursuing women in that way. And so I'm both watching porn and living a very promiscuous lifestyle. And I start modeling and acting, and I'm in, I'm doing Fashion Week, and, I'm this kid from a small town. All of a sudden I'm in New York, and I'm in Miami, and I'm in Paris, and all this stuff. And I'm living like a really crazy life. And
that industry too. We're both actors. We were in the industry for a while, and so we kind of know what that can look like too. And I'm sure being a model and pursuing acting, you're also around very beautiful people. And if you're already kind of in that lifestyle, it's like, man, this is great. Was there a time in that where you were, because for me, so I grew up Christian and pretty religious, and it was kind of taught to me where it's like having sex before marriage is bad. And I was like, okay, but then I don't think I really understood the why behind it and understood. And so then I kind of like, did everything and then eventually was just like, well, I mean,
what's the big deal?
What's the big deal? But then I would have this Christian guilt for myself where it's like, I did it was great. But then after I would feel super guilty, shameful, and like, I'm a piece of crap. And for me, it was like, well, if I'm already a piece of crap, I might as well just really feel like I might as well just put a bunch of crap on me because I'm already crap. So I was just like, well, let me just embrace this, because I'm like, well, it feels great, and this is all great. I don't, and it's like I might as well just like do as much as I possibly can, and then I'll like repent later or something like that. I don't know if you resonate with that at all.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's the same way that it's like, I eat healthy, I work out, I do all this stuff. But on Saturdays, often, what we'll do is, like, as a family, we'll go and get donuts in the morning, and then we'll go to the park. And then, like, on the way home, it's like, okay, it's going to be, traffic's bad. We live in Dallas. So it's like, okay, well, we might as well just stop and get something to eat. And it's like, what are we going to stop and get some, what are we going to get? And like, generally it's like, we have our, our family staples of what things that we normally eat that our kids will actually eat. And it's like, well, our decision is probably going to be indicative of the fact that we've already ate donuts. So we're probably going to be a little more loose with our diet, because you have this like weird justification of, well, I already did this, so it doesn't matter, and I might as well already do that.
Yes, right.
So I had one Oreo, I might as well have 5, 7.
Yes.
Right.
Oh my gosh, absolutely.
What does it matter?
Yeah.
It's weird the way that your mind works like that. But yeah, 100%, I resonate with that. And that was kind of the thing that was driving my behavior. It's like, I already did that, so I might as well continue doing whatever. Mm-hmm. And then, fraternity, college, all the stuff, behavior continues. And then 21, moved to LA, signed with LA Models. And, I have the opportunity to, like, I'm at the Improv, I'm working there a little bit. And just like, life is great. Like, there's no, my roommates are great. My friend group is great. Not crushing it, but I'm constantly getting auditions. I'm proud of my reel. I'm proud of, all of the stuff that I'm doing. And then at 22, these 3 girls walk into this bar and they ask me, hey, are you interested in doing porn? And I'm like, doing porn? That's what kind of question is that?
Yeah. These are literally just random women that came up to you.
I mean, it's like three smoking hot, like scandalously dressed. But I mean, they were headhunters. Like there was nothing about it that was, coincidence or happenstance. It was like, this was what they got compensated for. They went and talked to attractive guys and girls and asked them, would you ever do this? And if so, here's the information to the agency in which they're connected with, and they'll set up a meeting with the agent.
Wow.
And, the reality is, like, when you don't have a good reason to say no, you'll say yes to something you should have said no to.
Right.
And for me, I was like, well, again, I've been watching, so this is at 22. I saw porn at 13. So I've been watching porn and having sex with girls, for almost 9 years. That played a part in me knowing, no, I shouldn't go meet with a porn agent. That was never an idea that I had in my head. I never thought like, I want to be in porn. That never crossed my mind. Like, that was never, I don't think anyone that's ever done that I know of, thought like, okay, this is the career path that I want to pursue. Like, maybe today, maybe today, just because like OnlyFans and stuff is weird, but
yeah.
But again,
slippery slope.
Yeah. And I would actually love to talk about that at some point, just the bridge of, anyway, just content creation and where that can go.
Oh, yeah.
But so I had this conversation with these girls and I was like, I don't know. They were like, well, here's, the agent's information. If you want to have if you want to set up a meeting with them, this is what you do. And I was like, well, what, curiosity got the best of me. And I was like, okay, if it's super sketchy, if I go there and it's like, it's at like a motel and he's like picking lint out of his belly button or something like super weird. It's like, I'm just going to like
what you see in the movies.
It's like, if that happens, like, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
And I get there and so it's in Studio City. It's adjacent to where Universal Studios is. And I get there and eerily similar to my agent's setup in that, like, you're walking down the hallway and in the hallway, instead of like GQ and Maxim and stuff like that, it's like Playboy and Penthouse and Hustler. But anyone that's made the covers of those that he represents, they're up in the hallway. I walk down the hallway. There's a receptionist, his name is Derek. And he's like, Derek will be with you in a few minutes. He calls me back to his office, and it's so interesting that you said what you said earlier because of what I'm about to say. But I sit down in his office and just very straightforward. He's like, hey, let me ask you 3 questions. How did you grow up? What do you want to do in LA? And, why are you in LA? What are you trying to do? And what do you hope to accomplish? And the first question should have been a red flag. And I know it to be a red flag today because, people ask me often. I do a lot of work in the anti-trafficking and the restoration of women that have been rescued from sex trafficking, or even if they're doing sex work upon their own volition, which I'm pretty slow to even say that. But does the porn industry contain in which the aspect in which, how would you define sex trafficking, or what's the common theme there? It's force, fraud, coercion. Does that exist within the porn industry? And I'd say, no, it doesn't exist. The porn industry is completely dependent upon it. It is the foundation from which it's built on. So he's asking me, how did you grow up? AKA, is there something broken about your childhood? Is there an absence in your life that I can utilize to manipulate? It's a value proposition. Is there something, is there information that I can extract from you so that I can manipulate you to do what I want you to do? And I said, well, I just grew up pretty much me and my mom. Perfect. Then he's like, well, why are you in LA? I'm like, acting, modeling, I want to be in that space. I love it. He's like, okay, well, what do you hope to accomplish? Back to the thing you said earlier. I said, well, I guess I want to be famous.
Yeah.
And it was like, what I was really saying is I want to feel chosen. I want to be seen. I want to be known. But the thing about being famous is, what you said earlier, it's like, famous doesn't have a metric attached to it. And the bar in which you think, it's like, to the person just starting out on social media, it's like, man, I got 2,000 followers. If I ever had 100,000 followers, that would be amazing. And then you get there and guess what? You feel exactly the same. It's like, well, man, if I had 200,000, and on it goes, because when the thing in which you thought would make you feel the way that you thought it would feel, when it doesn't work, you just move the bar. And the same thing with being rich. And I think that's why, I do a lot of work with, college students, young adults. And it's like, people on the other side of, I watched porn for 10, 15 years. And then I met this girl. I'm a follower of Jesus. So the Bible says it's better to get married than burn with lust. So I'm going to marry this girl. I'm trying to do the right thing and I care about her, but I really just don't want to do that thing also. And then you get married and then I'm having sex with my wife now, but I thought, and I said to myself and maybe even to her and people that may or may not be speaking to my life, I said, and I truly believed, when I get married, I'll never watch it again.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And the reality is what you actually did is you brought brokenness into your life and you superimposed it on the person that you say you care about most. And it was, it wasn't like you out of malice, like you truly believed, well, if there's this thing that I have, then it will not, because what it actually does, you think it's going to supersede it or cover it up or remove it, and it doesn't. It actually just amplifies it. In the deeper you hide it, the more it hurts.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's just kind of, the whole thought behind a lot of that. But, but yeah, he asked me those 3 questions, and right after that, he's like, okay, you've got acting experience. And in the porn industry, we're actually moving into this time where for around 10 years, they were like parroting everything. And he's like, man, you can be the lead in like all these films, and like you're an attractive guy, and you can do this and that. Like you'll be the guy, so you'll be famous, you'll have money, and you'll win awards and all this stuff. And everything I wanted to hear. And I was like, man, while hearing that, I knew, man, this is not what I want to do with my life.
Sure.
But at the same time thinking, man, what, like, that's why like comparison is this thief of your joy.
Absolutely.
It's like, because I was doing okay. And my career was on a trajectory where, maybe I would have done well, but I thought, man, it's like my buddy Colin, we both, auditioned for this part, and he got it. And man, like, look at him now. And he did this, did this thing. And, this other person, it's like, all the people that, were represented by the same agent. It's like, man, they're so much far along than me, which was not true. It's like, I wanted everything except what I had, because I thought if I had what they had, I would feel what they feel.
Yeah.
Or what you're assuming that they feel.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. Because you don't even know. I mean, that's why like social media. Like social media is a beautiful thing, and I think it's amazing. But how it can be dangerous is that, it's like you look at anything that I post with my kids, dude. That's like the 500th shot. There's plenty of shots where no one is looking, and they're crying, and then but it's like it's a snapshot or a highlight. It's not the whole story. But yeah, so I'm listening to him say, hey, if you do all this stuff, I can make you this person. And I was like, maybe I'll do one. What harm could it be?
Was there a thought in there? Because I know, like, as you're rising as an actor, was there a thought of this could be a bridge to help me get to maybe a bigger, or was there ever a thought, because it could be go both ways, or was there a thought of like, ooh, this could damage my reputation in the acting field? Was there a thought in either way?
I think more so like the thought that I actually didn't finish. The thought was, maybe I'm not good enough to make it. Maybe even while knowing this is probably like a counterfeit or a secondary variation of what I actually want to do, maybe I'm not good enough to do what I actually want to do, and maybe this is the best it's going to get. So I think there was a level of that. I wish that I could say that I had the wherewithal to say, man, maybe this would be detrimental to my career.
Sure.
I wish I would have thought that, because I wouldn't have done it. But I didn't think that it was going to be helpful. I honestly, I didn't think much about it at all. I thought that I would just be able to, probably remain anonymous, at least on the first one. And then in my head, like, I didn't know anything about, porn. So I thought, I'm going to get handed, like a handheld camcorder and go in a room and have sex with a girl and get a check. And
I'm sure like in the light of kind of like the way that you were living and the way that a lot of people were, it's kind of like, well, I'm doing this anyway. Why not just get paid for it?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I was like, this is Friday night. The only difference is there's a camera and there's a check. That was the only difference.
Totally.
So I said, sure, and I'll do one. And I showed up to set and thinking that, again, I'm gonna walk into this like I don't know. And I
Yeah.
get there and it's like, hey, here's this paperwork where it's highlighted. Just sign that. Like, don't worry about reading it. It's all, legal stuff. Like, don't worry about it.
Okay.
And, in retrospect, what I was signing was like, I was signing like, this is how you get paid. But also, a lot of the questions that people ask me, and mostly antagonistic people saying, well, are you still getting, royalties for porn? There's no royalties in porn. I've never received $1 from, there's no residual payments from porn.
Wow.
You're an independent contractor and you sign a contract. And actually what I'm signing, in that moment and on every contract is that you're waiving all rights to audio, video, imagery, and not just that you're signing away the rights to it, you're signing away the rights and acknowledging that they can sell that content. They can, they can piece it and sell it to as many third parties for an infinite amount of time. So,
wow.
So
like
it's
your likeness, basically.
Yeah.
You're signing over your likeness.
100%.
Yeah.
So I didn't read it, signed it.
Sure.
And then the only knowledge in which, like the girl that I was working with, the only knowledge that I had about her is that you've got to go and get like the way in which you can work is that you have to go get a standardized like full panel STD test, like
Sure.
and AIDS test, and it has to be like 27 days or less old for it to be current, and that's how you have the availability to work. So the only knowledge I had of this girl was you have to look at a copy of her ID and her test, and like does her name and information match on the test, and you have to sign that you saw it. That is the only knowledge I had of this person.
Wow.
And then I walk in, and then it's weird because there's makeup, there's some makeup artists, and there's girls in makeup, and there's catering, there's PAs, wow. And it's like, there's someone shooting BTS, and I'm like, this is weird.
It's literally like being on a set.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And then like far off, there was like this girl in this daybed with like Kino flows like all around her. And a PA came up to me and it was like, hey, I understand this is your first day. Here's Viagra. Puts Viagra in my hand. He's like, if you've never taken that before, I'd bite it in half. Totally up to you. It's in your hand. You've touched it. It's yours. But we need you in like 30 minutes. And I'm like, oh my gosh, And
wow.
then I go in the bathroom and it's like, I'm not like giving myself a pep talk, but I'm like, what in the heck have I said yes to?
Yeah.
And again, the coercion and the manipulation, it's so like top to bottom in the process. So, I'm like, okay, here, like, I'm like, okay, where's the address? What's the logistics for the day? What's my call time? I don't know. Don't worry about anything. We're going to send, a town car to pick you up, and, they'll take care of you. Just be ready at this time. I was like, okay, well, where's the shoot at? They're like, oh, don't worry about it. They're gonna take care of you. So all of a sudden, I get to this place and I don't know where it is. And I'm now in retrospect, I'm like introspectively asking myself, like, what am I doing here? Do I want to do this? For me to leave, I would have to call the agent back and say, to the extent where if you were a kid at a party and you wanted to go home, it's like, mom, dad, I changed my mind. I want to come home.
Yeah.
I would need to say, hey, I changed my mind. I don't want to do this. So it's almost like you manipulate someone into knowing that there's going to be this level of shame or guilt that is going to stop you from saying yes. And that process continues throughout the industry, because what happens is, as you were talking about earlier, it's like when my belief in my identity becomes my behavior, I am no longer, a person that does porn. I am a porn star. And if I'm a porn star, what that means is my only value is that I can sell myself for sex. And if the only value I have is to sell myself for sex, then my no loses its validity, because I can't say no to anything, because the only thing I can say yes to is selling myself for sex. So if someone asks me to do a sex act and there's a paycheck attached to it, I have to say yes, because if I say no, then what if they stop asking me to do the only thing I can say yes to? So I can't say no. So there is no consent because I can't give consent to anything because I believe that the only thing I can do is say yes to that. And, so it's like, okay, what am I going to do? So I pop the pill and I chug a water and I walk into the sea of lights, and, there's no eye contact between me and the girl. There's a director telling me exactly what to do, and it's awkward and weird. And, this is like 2006. It's like 2006. So like huge cameras. It's like
over your shoulder.
Yeah, over the shoulder, but literally over my shoulder. And the reality is, this is true today. When if you're watching a porn and that it seems as if that girl's like looking right at you, like that's the point. Like pornography is fictitious in that it's depicting sex in a way that is completely fictitious because the sex is not for the people that are happening there. The sex is a product for the person watching it.
Right.
So there's not connection. It's complete disconnect because it's a performance. You've got two people who are broken, who are being paid to be there. There's a director, and then on the back end, there's editing and all this stuff. So it's like at the end, I'm like, that was not fun at all. And we were at this like weird studio in Encino, and I remember there was like hand soap in the shower, and I'm like trying to take a shower, and I like this memory is just like to this day so ingrained in my mind. Where I'm in the town car driving home, and I've got my little check, and I feel like lube like in the hair of my legs.
Wow.
Man, there's this scene from Redeeming Love where there's the actress where, she was working at a brothel, and she meets a guy, and, they have a connection, they start a relationship, and he wants to rescue her from this life. And she doesn't want to be in this life. But when all you've ever known is chaos, your heart craves chaos because comfort feels like danger, and because you don't know what peace is. And she goes back to the brothel, and she does something with someone, and she just feels dirty in a way that she can't, comprehend. And she's in this river. I don't know why it's making me emotional. But she's in this river, and she's got a rock, and she's scrubbing her skin, and what she's trying to wash off isn't on her skin, is in her soul. And that's how I felt. It's like, man, I can't get this off of me. And I was like, I'll never do this again. I'll never do this again. That was, I got paid like $500. And it was not sexy or gross, or there was nothing that was like, man, this is awesome. There was like not 1 second about it I was like, man, I'm so glad I'm here. Every second was, I wish I wasn't here. I didn't want to do it. But I didn't feel like I could say no. And I thought, in the same way, it's like, I've gone too far to turn back. So the only thing I can do is keep going. And that's what I did. And I do that scene, and I'm like, done, never do that again. But, I didn't really understand what I had said yes to. And what I had done was I had done a scene for the most popular porn site in the US, and they pump out 3 scenes a day, and they, this was, when digital marketing was kind of, just coming to fruition, and they had the most money. And so this was everywhere. So all of a sudden I got fraternity brothers like, hey dude, I saw you on this porn site. And then all of a sudden another message. And then all of a sudden I get a phone call that I really didn't want to get, because it was my mom. And she was like, again, from a small town, it only takes one person to know one thing for everyone to know everything. So someone had saw it and told my uncle, and my uncle told my mom. And then I get a call, and I'm like, my mom's like, did you do this? And I was like, I did. And, I mean, I didn't have like a really bad childhood, but man, if you were to ask me, like as a kid, like, who are you? I'm my mother's son. That's the thing that I'm most proud of. I'm, most sure that if I need something, my mom is there. My mom would never let anything happen to me. But I did experience a lot of hurt and a lot of brokenness. And it was interesting because there was a time in my life where like I had graduated high school and my dad had like sent me a card or something like that. And I was like, man, the card with the money in it like was great, but gosh, I would just love to hear the thing that I wanted to hear most was, son, I'm proud of you.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And because I didn't hear that, what I continue to think is like, man, what's wrong with me? So Satan, is like, well, there is something wrong with you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And in that moment, when I heard the only person that hadn't hurt me and my mom, Satan whispered to me, see, you're exactly who you thought you were. And then in that moment, I was like Joshua Broome didn't do a bad thing. I believed that I was a bad person. So of course I did bad things. And I was just crushed. And then in the same week, this is going everywhere. I get a phone call from my agent and they asked me to come in. And it's like, oh, great. Generally when I get asked to come in, it's like, okay, there's a project that's on the table. Like this is a good thing. Maybe I'm shooting a Polaroid for something and pretty quick, direct conversation. Hey, this is not going to be, a fun conversation, but I want you to know that, your name is linked to pornography. We looked into it and unfortunately we can't represent you anymore. We think a lot of you, but we can't be associated with someone that's made that decision. Wish you the best. And I'm just like, okay, well, because acting and modeling was like plan A, B, C, D. Like
Yeah.
So when I believe that, well, okay, I can no longer do the thing that I want to do most, and that the thing that I thought that I was like really good at and that gave me a lot of joy. I was like, well, the only logical thing for me to do is to continue doing porn, I guess, because, and it's like, I think it's, we could spend some serious time on this, but just this idea of like when you blow it or it doesn't work out or, the relationship ends, you didn't get the job, you get fired, like whatever it is. In that moment, it's so easy to allow that thing to happen to dictate what you do next.
Right.
And if you don't have, like foundational truths that you cling to, it's the difference of like responsive behavior and reactionary behavior. Reactionary behavior is I'm allowing a person, place, or circumstance to dictate my actions in my life, my belief about myself. But responsive behavior is, well, there's something that I'm committed to no matter what. There's something bigger than me where I'm going to respond, not how I feel, not what happened. I'm going to respond based on this truth that is true about me, that is definitive and unshaking. So it's like, if you don't have that, well, whatever happens is going to dictate what you do. And, it's crazy to think at 22, I thought, there's nothing else I can do but do porn. Ridiculous. Not true. Like absolutely not true. But I thought, that was true. Like that's essentially like what my book is about. It's like, if you believe a lie to be true, it becomes true to you and you live as if it's true. And I thought, okay, well, all I can do is porn. So, and then right on time, the porn agent called, hey man, getting a lot of like good feedback about that scene. I would love to sign you to a long-time contract. And I was like, okay, let's do it. And then, that high achiever in me and the work ethic in me, which are good things and God-given things, I pointed in the wrong direction. So I thought, okay, I understand people, I understand networking, I understand, how to navigate, the industry in general. So I bet I can crush it. So not only am I going to do porn, I'm going to become, the biggest, baddest, make the most money. And I did. And it's like, I won 23 different awards. I made millions of dollars. I got nominated for Performer of the Year 4 times. And in 2012, I won it. But when I made my first million, I thought, man, when I make that million, I'm going to feel something I've never felt before. And guess what? I did. I hurt worse than I never hurt before because it didn't fix what I thought it would fix. So it was not only more broken, I was like, gosh, well, if I win Performer of the Year, that's like, all the studios and the people within the industry said that I'm the best. And if I'm the best, then, that will solidify something in me. And, for 4 years, I got nominated, but didn't win. And then on the fourth year, I got nominated and I won. And I remember like seeing the award and seeing my name on that and just thinking it didn't work. And the depression that I already had deepened, the anxiety that I already had amplified. And I thought, man, if this is not going to fix me, maybe I'm unfixable. And the only thing that makes sense is for me to die because I can't keep living like this because I just was hurting so bad.
Yeah.
And there was a lot that, happened because this is over, over 6 year period. And it was like, girls that I dated in the industry and just the reality of suppressing reality. Cause like I'm dating a girl and she's in the industry and your ecosystem of friends are in the industry more often than not, because who's going to understand the life that you're living? I mean, you guys know, it's like you're spending hours upon hours on set with these people. So naturally like form friendships and I'm sitting at dinner with a friend and his girlfriend and my, I'm sitting with my girlfriend and he had sex with my girlfriend that day and I'd had sex with his girlfriend that week. But we're saying out loud that we're in a monogamous relationship. We're exclusive. And you're suppressing reality because you're saying that the sex that happened, on set with a camera and a check, it was nullified because it was work. And it wasn't,
of course.
And, so just the reality.
I would assume, I mean, there is like and whether it's like you said, like as long if it's a truth that you believe is true and you 100% like believe it, that can happen to validate why you do things too. Like you can make a truth for yourself and say that, well, this is just true. And I would assume in the industry, that's just work. And like, and that's like, it's like acting. It's like going to, I feel like in the industry, this happens a lot too. And just like I think in an emotional way where you do a love scene or you like your whole role is to fall in love with this person and you're married, but you're having to fall in love with this other person, but you're like, hey, don't worry about it, honey. Like it's just acting. And how is that in this industry where I guess that's why you date somebody that's in the industry, because you understand kind of how it is.
Or you at least you pretend to.
Yeah, I was wondering, is it how much of it is actually true, where it's just like, there was a feeling, there was just kind of like, yeah, but that's just how it is, and how much of it was actually inside of being like, yeah, but that really does bother me.
I mean, I think, to kind of double down on like when you suppress reality, you create this chaos within yourself, but also there's this numbing because you're trying to alter or create a plausible reality based on what you're saying is true. So you have to live out the thing in which you proclaim is true, because even if you feel like somewhat hypocritical in your head, you would never say that out loud because, to my point, it's like, there's tons of content of me all over the internet when I was in the porn industry saying, I love my job. This is amazing. It's the best job ever. I love this. I never did. I never loved it. But it was my job to say that. And I had to believe that. Because what am I going to say? It's like, I hate my job. I'm a hypocrite. I'm dying inside, because all that's going to do is amplify the way that you feel. But I think you like because sex is created for connection, to have sex in a disconnected way, it distorts your understanding of reality in a way that nothing else will. And, I'm living this life where, in reality, I'm the kid that, grew up with my mom's beautiful and, I'm defending her against like guys trying to talk to her. And, my mom tells this story of me like throwing a can of corn at someone, like when I'm a kid, I'm like, get away from my mom. So I was just jealous.
Can of corn, that would do some damage.
Yeah, absolutely. But I grew up this jealous kid, And then, of course, I was a jealous boyfriend. And then I'm still this jealous kid. So was I okay with the person that I was dating for almost 2 years, like going and have sex with other people? Absolutely not.
Mm-hmm.
I hated it. Even one time I tried, this was towards the end of my career, but she was all about it and she wanted to talk about it. And I was like, I don't want to talk about it. And then
like brought work home.
Yeah. She wanted to talk about what she did and she thought it was hot. And I was like, I don't want to do that. And then this thought creeped into my mind. It's like, what kind of man are you? Like, if she's saying, if you're doing this and she's saying that she wants to do this and, like, are you, insecure or whatever? And then it's like, I said out loud, like, sure, we can start talking about it. And so that was another layer of me, I didn't want to hear it and I hated it inside, but I acted as if I didn't. And it was just like, because like compromise never doesn't lead to more compromise.
Yeah.
Like compromise always begets compromise. Compromise always gives birth to more compromise. And there's no area of your life in which you can have compromise that doesn't bleed into every other area of your life in some aspect. But
and the compromise continues to grow.
Sure.
Like it's like the first compromise may seem very small, but then that it's like, I don't know what's a good example. It's like doing a white lie or something, and then it just like creates this dramatic. Or what were you about to say?
Well, I was just saying. I mean, the most common example that I give is that I watch porn, and then I know that my wife doesn't want me to watch porn, but I hide the fact that I watch porn to my wife, and I continue to watch it, and then that leads to me. There was an interaction with my coworker where we shared a look that was a little too long, and that I should not have been okay with that. And then there was a DM that was sent that I shouldn't have responded to, but I did, and I should have told my wife about it, but I didn't. And then all of a sudden there was a work party that I was at and she was at, and then all of a sudden, it started with me watching porn, but it ended up with, someone having an affair. And I'm like, oh, I would never do that. How did I end up there?
Yeah.
I said, well, you can easily trace the breadcrumbs, to me doing the thing I said I would never do. Well, it's not an accident. There was actually a clear trajectory of this progressive compromise in my life. And it was because there's, in marriage, there's this clear barrier, this clear boundary. And when I start moving the boundary, it doesn't only move, it becomes to get very vague. And the more vague the boundary, it just becomes no boundary at all. So, I mean, that's the way I think about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like in my head, it's just like, I was dying inside. And on top of that, like people were dying left and right in my life. I mean, to this day
in the industry.
Yeah. So to this day, like not people I knew of, like people who were my friends. I knew their real names. I hung out with them. We, went to dinners, all this stuff, vacations. 43 people have died of either suicide or overdose.
Wow.
And to put that in contrast, like the porn industry, when I was in the porn industry, is not like, porn is today or OnlyFans is today. The porn industry was small. So imagine 40 people of your 2,000 person high school dying of suicide.
Oh my gosh.
Like thinking about like, you know them on a deep level, their sisters, their friends, their significant others, like you know aspects of their life, and they're dying in front of me. And just the reality that, like the industry, I think it was in 2000, maybe not, but there was an HIV outbreak in the industry, and there was someone that I had unprotected sex with who contracted HIV, had HIV, died of HIV, and I had unprotected sex with them. Wow. And just thinking that, man, I mean, that's one example, but there's many examples that I could give. I should be dead. So just like that being the reality. So I'm just like, death is the only thing that makes sense to me. At the end, I win the award. I'm like, death just makes sense. And I needed someone to give me permission to harm myself. And I was going to do that by going into a bank and depositing a check. And historically, I would do anything other than hand the actual check to a teller. I would do, Dropbox, ATM, like mobile deposit, like anything other than hand the check to a person,
Mm-hmm.
because the check would, be either made out from some company that was actually, very clearly associated with sex, and the person that would write the check, more often than not, being an antagonist, it would write something on the memo of the check. It wouldn't say, it would say like the title of the movie or something grotesque on purpose. Because it's like, just thinking of like, as you chip away at this person's dignity and worth, they're going to stay, they're going to do what they're told, and they're going to be easy to manipulate.
Wow.
And so for me at that point, I was like, okay, I'm going to walk into this bank and I need this person to agree with me. And the way that I was going to, do that is I'm going to hand them the check. I done, the last scene I'd done, it was clear in the memo. It was something graphic. And I was like, okay, hand this check. And I was waiting for them to maybe shake their head. Best case scenario, say something of disgust, something. And literally no reaction at all. And I'm sitting there, I'm like pale, shaking, tears streaming down my face. And just because I had made a very clear plan to take my life. And it was at home on the counter waiting for me. And I just needed her to give me permission. And instead, she said nothing. And after she slid me the receipt, I didn't know what to do. And I was kind of frozen. And this was like middle of the day. And no one else was really in the bank. And the teller came out from behind and walked around. And she put her hand on my shoulder and looked at me and said, "Joshua, are you okay? Joshua, how can I help you?" And what she didn't know was that because of the shame that I felt, I thought I've disqualified myself from being my mother's son. So I stopped answering her calls and her texts. I stopped talking to my little brother. I stopped talking to anyone that wasn't in agreement with my lifestyle because I didn't think I could change. And that was the first time I'd heard my name in over a year.
Wow.
I just allowed my barber, the people who, at the gym that I went to, just everywhere I did life, they just started calling me that stage name, and I allowed it. And Joshua had just stopped to exist. And when she said my name, it was just like, it woke me up in a way. And I felt the weight of, man, my mom is so good to me. And all she wanted to know is her little boy okay.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's not that, I had gone on vacation and hadn't called her. She's looking at the news and seeing there's people where I live doing what I'm doing that are dying left and right. Like, all of my roommates are dead except one. So my mom's, is my son okay? What, and I'm not answering. So I just felt the weight of like, gosh, like, I need to call my mom. So I literally ran out of the bank and go to my house, and I call my mom. And I've got a good Southern mama. So when I called her for the first time in a long time, she chewed me out pretty good. And then she said to me everything that I didn't think she would. Like, "Joshua, I love you so much, and you are so much better than the way you're living. And I want you to know something. No matter what you do, no matter how far you run, you will always be my son." And there was just something in me that was just like, I wanted to run away, in that I wanted to no longer live, but just something was like, man, I need to go home. I just need to run home, to mom. And I did. So it's like, I subleased my place. I got rid of, what stuff I could. And I just packed a bag and just left.
Wow.
And I get to Raleigh, North Carolina, and, I'm there, but I'm like, now what? What am I going to do? And the only thing that I thought that I could do was that, I had started doing CrossFit, and I had a level 1 CrossFit certification. So I thought maybe I could, get a job at a CrossFit gym, coaching CrossFit. So I applied to all these gyms, and one hired me and started working there. And I just kind of put the same mentality into, if I get enough credentials and network enough and do enough, I'll be enough and make enough, so that, I didn't think I could change. But I thought maybe I can put enough good dirt on my bad dirt so I don't look dirty. Because I don't think I could actually change. So I could never not be dirty, but maybe I could manage the optics. Maybe I could manage people's perception of me, not by, I'm not this person that never did this stuff. Maybe I could do enough good things to outweigh the bad things so I don't look so bad. And on top of that, it's like day one, it's like I shave my head, I cover up my tattoos, I delete all my social media, and I'm just like, ignorant to believe like this is like, it's going to be like I never did this stuff. It's just going to go away. I'm in Whole Foods day one, Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm walking down an aisle and a guy stops me. He's like, bro, I know who you are. Like you're this guy. And he calls me by my stage name. And I'm just like, and then I kind of owned it. It was just like, this is just something I did. This is who I was. But I'm just not doing that thing anymore. And I would lie until I got found out, I'd withhold information until I got found out. And I did that for 2 years. I got a great mentor, was working in a great gym, but then I got a bunch of, credentials, worked my way up and thriving in the strength and conditioning space. And I was okay until I wasn't, I was pretending like I was okay and convinced myself I was okay until I realized that I wasn't, because again, I couldn't hide and I couldn't change my heart. And I was carrying a ton of trauma. And then I met, this beautiful girl walks into this gym, and, she's wearing like Iowa, like cheerleading, like stuff, like all the time, different stuff. And I was like, okay, obviously, she's cheered at Iowa, loves Iowa. But she's the best athlete in the gym, like crazy gymnast, like can do all the stuff. But she doesn't really hang out. Like she's not very like sociable, not really like in the weeds of like when we do parties and stuff like that, never hangs out. And, but I ask her out a bunch of times and she shuts me down a bunch of times, which
playing hard to get.
Yeah. Which it increased my intrigue.
Well, it does. It does. There's something to that. And I'm sure for you, that probably was not something that you necessarily dealt with a ton.
No.
So it probably increased it even more.
I was like, this is great. And, but then she was like, no to dinner, no to a movie. Then one day she was like, well, I go for a long run, on this day, do you want to meet me for this run? I was like, I'll take whatever I can get,
Yeah.
And, I get there early and I'm waiting on her to get there. And then all of a sudden I start thinking, I'm like, man, I don't think she knows my backstory. And I'm like, man, if she knew that, she'd want nothing to do with me. And then for the first time, I was like, all right, I'm going to be forthcoming with this information. And if I'm honest, it wasn't because I was trying to be a man of integrity. I thought, man, if I don't tell her this, it's going to work out bad for me. Like I'm going to get fired from my job or something bad's going to happen. So I'm like, I'm going to protect myself from getting hurt and potentially getting in trouble. So I'm going to tell her, hey, this is true about me. Yeah. And as soon as she gets there, the walk never made it. The run never made its way to a run, stayed at a walk. And I was just like, hey, there's something I want to tell you. Here's a little icebreaker. There's a bomb I want to drop off on you.
Yeah.
And I would just, it was almost like I blacked out and gave like a 5-minute monologue of like, this is how bad I am. And the thesis was, I'm this kid that his daddy didn't want. And I've done all this porn that's still on the internet, and everything that I've ever done that causes me the most shame is available on the internet for the world to see. This is who I am. And she was just like, pretty floored, rightly so, by it. So we just like walked in silence, and I was just like, I was waiting for like a ninja chop to the throat, or or her to tell me to leave, or her just leave, or but she was just like, letting it marinate, just letting it cook. And then she stopped and kind of planted her feet. And she looked at me and said, "Hey, I don't want to minimize what you told me. I don't want you to think that I'm not saying that, your actions don't have, real repercussions. I don't want you to think that I don't, care about the things that are clearly traumatic to you. But I do want to tell you this. You are not defined by the worst thing you've ever done, and you won't be defined by the greatest thing you ever do.
Wow.
Because you are not the author of you. God is. Do you know him?" And I was like, know about him, maybe.
Was that like your intro to like Christ, or did you grow up? Did you grow up Christian at all? Or?
So my grandparents, like very devout Christian. My grandmother went to church Wednesday night, Sunday morning, Sunday night. Listened to gospel music all day long. But I lived there with her until we were 7. Until I was 7, and then my mom got married for a short period of time. And then after that, I think there was a level of shame that my mom made the decision that led to me, and then got in this really bad broken marriage. And she thought I could move home. And, her mom and dad were like, "Please move home." But she thought, I've got to make it myself. And so like that led, to us kind of, being on our own. But outside of that, so once we left my grandmother's house, it was, the traditional, like we went to church on Easter and Christmas, and we prayed at Thanksgiving. Like outside of that, there was no acknowledgement of Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. Didn't understand that at all. I believed, the cosmological argument in that, there was a God that, if time, space, and matter all came into existence simultaneously, there had to be a timeless, spaceless entity that was catalytic in all those things being created. Like that made sense. But as far as a personal relationship, no clue. So I was like, yeah, sure. God created everything, created us. Yes. I know that. She was like, well, I've had a relationship with Jesus Christ since I was in 7th grade, and it is by him, through him, for him, in which I live, and he's the foundation from which I live my life. What kind of food do you like? I was like, what? Are you an alien from outer space?
Wow.
What? I was like, obviously, you are, holier than me.
Yeah. I mean,
but
shout out.
Crazy.
I mean, shout out, because like that is just it's such a beautiful story, and just like shows the grace of God through her. That probably was the first time. I don't know. Was it the first time you kind of experienced that from somebody or through somebody?
Well, because it makes me think of, not to nerd out too hard, but just thinking about so like Colossians chapter 4, like Paul's in prison, writing this letter where he is in prison for preaching the gospel, and he's praying for opportunities to preach the gospel. He's praying to do it clear and to walk in wisdom towards outsiders. And Colossians chapter 4, verse 6 talks about how he's praying that his communication is both gracious and it's seasoned with salt, so that he might know how he ought to answer each person. There's this book, Master Plan of Evangelism, Robert E. Coleman, and I use this quote in almost every talk that I give. He talks about how people are not looking for an explanation. More often than not, they're looking for a demonstration. And when she demonstrated both grace and truth to me, it hit me like a freight train. Because I was like, you're saying everything that I ever thought was wrong, because my worldview was contention of, I am my father's son, and I have that was not wanted, and I have done bad things. So I'm this bad kid that his dad didn't want. She's like, no. Those are aspects about you that, are to a certain extent true. But those are not indicative of your identity, because if you're not the author of your identity, then you don't get to define yourself based on what's happened to you or what you've done, because those things may be true of you, but are not the most true of you. And I was just I was like, man, it was like she was catalytic in this curiosity that didn't make sense because not only did she like, hey, well, what kind of food do you like? Do you like tacos? She was like, what kind of dreams, hopes do you have? Tell me about your family. And I was like, she was asking about SMART goals, and I'm like, I don't even know what an acronym is. I was like, but I was like, I don't know, but I felt so seen and so curious. And we walked and talked for hours, and then we text all week, and then she invited me to church. And I was like, I'm not sure about church, but I'm certainly going to be wherever this pretty girl is. And I go to church and I hear the gospel. And 2 Samuel chapter 9 is this story of David and Mephibosheth, and Mephibosheth was the son of Jonathan, who was the son of Saul, and he was in hiding. And he was in hiding because historically, because of who his father was, he was in line to be king. But David was chosen and anointed to be king. So anyone in history, culturally, if there was an opposing member of another family that could potentially cause an uprising and overtake that kingdom, that person was identified and killed. And so he was in this place called Lodabar, hiding. And David's introspectively thinking, at this point of his reign, he had just rebuilt the kingdom, and he's asking himself, years after, all this has happened, how can I show the loving kindness of God, like, to his people? And then he remembers Jonathan, who he was friends with. He had made a promise to him that he would show him kindness and to his family forever. And he's like, man, is there anyone left out of the house of Saul? And he finds this guard, Ziba. And Ziba is like, yeah, I know where Mephibosheth is. And he goes and finds him. And Mephibosheth is thinking, man, I'm found, doomsday. And he's standing before David. And David doesn't kill him. He says, hey, I'm going to invite you into my kingdom. I'm giving you a seat at my table, and I'm going to restore your grandfather's land, and not just any land, part of Canaan. So I'm inviting you into the kingdom of God, and I'm giving you a seat at my table, not for a day, not for a week, but forever. And I'm just like, this is incredible. And then 2 Samuel chapter 9, verse 8, Mephibosheth, how does he respond to that? How do you respond to thinking you're going to die and then being given everything? You say, yes, amazing. Well, thank you so much. No, he says, what would you want with a dead dog like me?
Wow.
And I had heard everything the preacher had said. I had heard him talk about Jesus being born of a virgin, living a perfect life, being fully God and fully man, living this perfect life, facing temptation, but never sinning, and going to the cross and dying and being raised on the third day. And if you put your faith in him, then you're saved, you're forgiven. And I'm thinking, like, that's amazing. But then 2 Samuel chapter 9, I'm this dead dog. Like, what would you want with me? I'm thinking, don't you know who my dad is? Don't you know what I've done? Like, I'm thinking, that's amazing, whoever that's for, but you don't know my story.
Yeah.
Because and that's in the way that God's grace, it is comprehensible, but we reject it sometimes because we think our sin is more important than the cross,
or greater. Like, we've just done too bad of things that we couldn't possibly be forgiven for this, because maybe you have evidence in your life that people haven't forgiven you or haven't or treated you different, and that's the evidence that you're going off of.
I mean, that's what the world says. And then I'm like, that's just kind of where I was. I was like, man, that's incredible for whoever that's for, but that's not for me. And then he reads Hebrews 12:2, which talks about the joy that was set before Jesus as he endured the cross and scorned our shame, and he's seated at the right hand of God. And I was just like, joy. If he's fully God, fully man, fully omniscient, all knowing, why would he, knowing what has happened, knowing what's going to happen, why would he have joy in his heart knowing that he's going to be crucified, which is this humiliating, most painful death imaginable? Why would he have joy? And then I realized he had joy in his heart because he had love in his heart for me. The God of the universe went to the cross with a smile on his face because he knew that you were on the other side. And when the thought that I was unlovable and that I had a father that rejected me and never chose me, when I realized that I was chosen before the beginning of the world. Romans 5:8, while knowing the worst thing you've ever done, knowing the worst thing you've ever done, like Jesus chose you and went to the cross and died. Why? Because he loves you that much. And the love that I understood in that moment like hit me like a freight train. And I hit my knees and I cried and I stood up, with a snotty nose and in tears, and the weight that I felt that I'd been carrying my whole life, that I wasn't worth anything. And I realized that because of what Jesus has done, he said I was worth everything. And my favorite part of that, outside of the grace of God, is that that girl that went on that walk with me, her name is Hope. And she's been my wife. It'll be 9 years in July.
That's amazing.
And we've got 4 boys, and I love sharing my story because Ephesians 3:20 is true. Like, God stands ready to do exceedingly abundantly more than you could ever hope, dream, or imagine. And the reality is that like God stands ready to do for you, and he wants for you, and he created you to do more than you could ever have the guts to dream.
Yeah.
And what I've seen him do over the last 10 years of my life, because that day that I almost took my life, it was January of 2013. So just to see what he's done, over the last 11 years, incredible, incredible. So to be where I am today, and where Romans 8:28 is true. Like he's going to take all of it, and he's going to use it for his good, for your good, for those who love him. And what I love talking with people about is like, if you understand like Ephesians 2:10, where there's things that God has predestined before the beginning of the earth, before you were ever created, when he was on bended knee, creating you out of soil, and breathed his own breath into you and you were created. There were things about you that he put in you that if you understand them and you walk in them, you'll find the most peace, the most joy, the most satisfaction ever imaginable. And in finding that, he is so gracious and so kind that even in us misusing our talents, he will use seasons of our life when we were far from God. We were actually, like for me, I was sharpening my ability as a communicator in spite of myself. So in spite of me being far from God, he's kind enough and loving enough and patient enough to wait and walk and protect me as I'm living in destruction. But he's taking all those things and he's knowing I'm going to continue calling my son. And when he does come home, there's going to be times and reps and stuff that he's done that I'm going to, there's some things that need to be, done away with, but there's aspects of your personality that you've expressed before you meet Christ, where you were becoming the person that you were created to be in spite yourself. And that's what I've seen. That's what I've seen. But yeah, I mean, to be sitting here today, to have a theological education, to work at the biggest Christian mental health organization in the world, to be a small part of what they're doing, to get to speak on different platforms and stages. It's a gift, but at the same time, it's so humbling and so loving to know not a bit of it is a surprise to God.
Right. Wow. That is for so many people, because when we were hearing your story and listening to your story, just thinking personally, or I know other people that it doesn't matter what you have done, what mistakes you've done, what you regret, that doesn't have to identify who you are for the rest of your life. And you're living proof of that, which is why, I just applaud you. I just think you're doing just such amazing work, and you're going to have such an impact. And it's because you have that, you have a relatability beyond that. If you didn't go through what you went through, it could be easy to look back and be like, I regret, I wish it wouldn't happen. But instead you're using that to then impact and basically just show the love and grace of God as a living testimony, which I think like it that in itself is more powerful than just speaking like, hey, God loves you, God has grace for you. But it's another thing to see it happen through somebody's, like, see the fruits of somebody and see it shine through. So
and I think it's like, when I think like Ephesians 2:10 is like it for me. It's like, my whole life, it's so funny. It's like I remember, like as early on at Liberty University, thinking, man, if people knew my story, I'd probably get kicked out of here, and then like being embarrassed about like when people ask personal questions, like not to share too much, like even to professors. I'm like, oh gosh. But then, when my theology deepened, I had a higher view of God and a lesser view of my sin. And to stand on the stage last fall, speaking at convocation to 13,000 students at Liberty, and say exactly that, where it's like, this is where I was, this is what I did, but because of what Jesus has done, look what God did. And I think like it's in the stepping into that. Because it's one thing to be saved, but like when you get saved and you get baptized, like that's amazing. But like now, like you're a new creation, but you've got these new responsibilities, but like you have the opportunity because John 10:10 talks about like the enemy wants to steal, kill, and destroy, but Jesus wants you to experience abundant life. Like John 15 talks about your life is to bear much fruit, not some fruit. You're not supposed to do like a little bit of stuff in your life. Like God wants to, express himself through you in an excellent way. So I would say like how you steward your story matters because we all have a story. So like, what have you gone through that you can optimize to impact others in Jesus' name? So for me is one thing to share my story, but again, the same mentality that, I like, way back in the day, like when I used comp cards and stuff like that, it's like, man, I knew the shots that were optimal. And it's like, I always thought strategy. I was like, I always thought like that. So for me, it was like, man, I've got this story and like, obviously I want to like deepen like my theological understanding, but who will give me the opportunity in the same way the strength conditioning industry, I found a mentor that would both invite me into his network and teach me what he knows, because I want to find someone who is doing what I want to do and knows the people I want to know. So in the same way, it's like, man, if I want to change this world, how can I do it? I found an organization in DC, it's called NCOSI, so National Coalition Opposing Sexual Exploitation. And I was like, hey, you guys are a impactful, effective organization in that you're combating, sex trafficking, but also there's a law firm. And they have a law firm there also in DC that's part of their organization. So they have this senior legal counsel. And I'm like, I want to know how to be an advocate, but also I want to understand legislation. It's like, put me in rooms with congressmen so I can share a powerful analytical story, but give me like legislation that has holes in it or things that have made its way to Congress or things that exist that shouldn't, or things that, could impact people that want to pass. So over the last 5 years, being in rooms with people that gave me opportunities that I didn't deserve, relationships that I never thought I would have, that gave me opportunities to do things, never thought I would do, but it was like, I did the work in that, man, how can I impact the other side? And being in rooms where I'm advocating for age legislation and just, over the last 5 years, it's been passed in 37 different states in some aspect. And I was in Houston a few months ago, testifying, and in Texas, they're taking this age verification legislation, which simply is, hey, if you want to go on a porn site, you've got to be 21 and you got to produce government issued ID to a third party. It's not capturing your data. It's just confirming your data, government issued ID, confirming your data that you're 21 if you want to see the site. Same thing is like, if you want to buy tobacco, if you want to see a rated R movie, if you want to buy alcohol, if you're going to have something in the public square, you're called to protect people and children from themselves. So that's it. And now the Free Speech Coalition is challenging that's an impingement on First Amendment rights. And I get to stand in a room and not only share my story, but to share from a legislative standpoint why that's both unconstitutional and really selfish. And to see that this summer, I believe, is going to stand and have the opportunity to be catalytic in that passing in all 50 states. And,
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
and by no means like I did that, but the fact that I don't know why I'm getting emotional about it, but it's like the fact that I got to be in the room and I'm a trusted voice in that space. It's because I did the work, but I stepped into the space that God wanted me to be. So it's both.
Yeah.
It's that God wants to, like God wants you, whoever's listening, God wants
Yeah.
you to accomplish incredible things. Like God does not want you to have a mundane life. Like God wants to do something incredible through your life, but it's going to take both, competence and courage that exist beyond yourself. And it's going to take a lot of work, but man, if you're willing to step into that space and when, things don't go the way that you thought or life happens, just continue to lean in and keep moving forward. Like he will blow your mind. Like he will blow your mind. And that's who God is. And that's what I want for everyone, because when you live in that purpose, you never doubt, man, why am I here? What am I supposed to do? And love him and trust him and discover the thing that you were created to do and do all of it with all of your heart, with all of your mind, with all of your soul, like with all of your courage, like do it all and you won't question anything.
Yeah. Go for it.
So what do you say to the person who, I'm just literally thinking of people who I know, who it's like they have the head knowledge of kind of what you were saying, like I know about God, but they haven't had that moment that you were talking about where it's like the love hit you like a freight train. They haven't had that. Maybe they want to experience that, but they haven't had their heart impacted in that way, or they want to walk in their purpose and do what God has for them, but they don't know what that is. How do you encourage someone who's in that season?
Yeah. I mean, I think, because at the end of the day, I think most of the problems that are attached to addiction are not solved by like platforms or PDFs or programs. They're solved by connection.
Absolutely.
Because like that's my story. My story is that like yes, it was at the church that I found all those things. I found community, I found accountability, I found people that would challenge me. Proverbs 27:6 talks about the wounds of a friend. I needed people in my life because I had plenty of people that encouraged me. I need a few people in my life that would give me a kick in the butt. I needed people in my life that knew aspirations that I had and standards that I wanted to hold myself to. And they loved me enough to hold me to those standards, even if it hurt my feelings. So I would say like to the person that has this, man, I want to have a relationship with God, but I don't know where to start. The Bible tells us that, seek him and you'll find him. You look at the Gospels, the book of John is the most clear because, there's certain Gospels that were written, to the Jew or to the Greek, but the book of John, it was written so that the world would understand. And John's like, hey, here's what I want you to know. Here's who Jesus is. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and it was with God, and there was nothing that's ever been made that was made outside of, by Jesus. Nothing was made without him. Everything was null and void without him. So I want you to know, here's who Jesus is. Here's what Jesus did. And this is why he did it. And if you understand that, there's something for you on the other side of that. And there's something for you to do once you understand it. And as simple as that. And it's like the gospel is not complicated.
Yeah.
And, he tells us to come to him like children. The gospel is not we want to complicate it because we're complicated. But at the end of the day, it's that. And it's like to the person wanting to find their purpose, how do you solve any problem? Well, I need to take inventory of my life. Is my life moving in the direction of my goal? What in my life is standing in the way or obstructing my ability to move towards that thing? Also, I need a mentor. I need to be discipled. So it's like, I was, regarding like any kind of auditory skill. If you're going to be an orator of any kind, you need constructive feedback. If you're going to be a good 3-point shooter, you need a coach. If anything in your life you want to be good at it, you need someone to critique you so that you can be seen outside of yourself, because you have a skewed view of you. So it's like you need someone to say, hey, you're doing really great in these areas. But I want to challenge you to step into these, or maybe there's just something you're doing is dumb. Like you should not do that. This is not, you might want to do that. And again, like, it's just a reality of, I love, the simplicity of this Craig Rochelle quote. He says, if it's important to you, you'll find a way. If it's not, you won't.
Yeah. Yep.
It's as simple as that. If it's truly important to you, you'll find a way. To the person, like, it's like, I'm not the busiest person in the world, but I've got 4 kids, and I do about 100 speaking engagements a year plus podcasts. So it's like, I'm busy. So it's like, how do you have time to read your Bible? Well, do you miss breakfast? No. Well, it's like, if you prioritize it, it's no longer something you do. It's part of your day. So like, make things a priority. If it's important to you, make a way. And it's like, for me, it's like, if it's on my schedule, if it's in my Google Calendar, it's getting done. If it's not looking good,
Yes.
If there's not a Google invite, there's not a calendar invite, it's not looking good for me showing up. But it's like, man, if like, I am not, like my wife is, but I'm not a highly organizational or administrative person. I am not, I am not that at all.
Yeah.
But it's like, for me to say I'm just disorganized, maybe that's true. But again, like, even to the person saying, I'm just a guy. So, I struggle with lust, so I look at porn every once in a while. I don't want to, but it's just guys being guys. If you're saying I'm going to follow Jesus Christ, what you're now saying is, I've accepted the fact that Jesus Christ went to the cross and died for me, so you're called to die for him. Romans 12:1 talks about, in view of God's mercy, so mercy being the withholding of what I do deserve, if I understand the thing in which I deserve, which is death, has been withheld from me because of my faith in Jesus, a reasonable response to that is for me to live my life as a living sacrifice. For me to understand I'm now a carrier of this word of reconciliation. I've got the antidote for death, and it's my job to tell as many people as possible, but also more is caught than it's taught. So my life and the way that I live matters. The decisions that I make matter. So it impacts me. So to the person saying, well, I gave my life to Jesus, I love Jesus, but I'm struggling with porn. Sex addiction is real. Like, if you look at a CT scan, like, someone who's been watching porn for 10 years, someone who's been using either heroin or cocaine, like, the impact, the traces to your synaptic cleft, like the traces in your brain, those pathways, those patterns, they're so deeply ingrained, they're equally visible in both.
Wow.
The neurological damage you've done to your prefrontal cortex, real. But also, what is real is neuroplasticity, which your mind can be altered and changed and repaired. So is it going to be difficult? Yes. Yes. But in the same way, like, you can build resistance. You can build resolve, because the interesting thing from a neurological standpoint is pornography consumption damages your prefrontal cortex. And your prefrontal cortex is the thing in which allows you to be, resilient, or to persevere, to say, hey, my wife's must be amazing because, I've seen her give birth 4 times, and I've seen her do burpees, where it's like, you're twisted. I'm scared of you.
And she did both at the same time.
Yeah.
At one point.
Yeah, it's true. So it's just like, but what it does is it makes it more difficult for you to say no to the thing you don't want to do. And I mean, you look at, historically, World War I, this was the first time that pornography was so problematic, because the printing press in London was shipping porn to the soldiers, and they were just a mess. And this was the first time in a big way chaplains have been sent, to any kind of aspect of in military, and they show up. and they're meeting with these soldiers, and they're all struggling with porn. And the byproduct of that was that they were not going into battle in the way they should. They were not caring about the person to their left or their right. Because what does porn teach? Porn teaches you not to love people and use things. It teaches you to love things and use people. It causes me not to want to move forward. It causes me to shrink back. So now the porn was removed, and all of a sudden they started executing their jobs in a way.
Wow.
But just that's the reality of it. Like, Satan knows that he can corrupt your mind, and it makes it more and more difficult to say no. And not only that, the way that dopamine works is in the same way that I used to be able to drink a half a cup of coffee and felt like, woo,
Yeah.
Now it takes a little more,
Yeah.
I mean, like a double espresso,
Yeah.
But that's the way that it works. So in the same way, to the person that, man, it was a Instagram or a TikTok thing that I thought about, and I masturbated, and then I found myself looking at porn, and then all of a sudden, I have a prostitute. Like, how did I get to this place? Well, the thing that used to entice me no longer enticed me because it became normative to me, and it no longer had an allure. And that's the way that your brain is wired to work. And Satan knows very well how your brain works. And he knows what he can tempt you with. So what's scary is pornography in the same way, it algorithmically is studying you. So not only are you watching porn, as you watch porn, it's studying what you're looking at, and it's giving you something a little bit darker, a little bit dirtier, a little bit deeper, so that it entices you a little bit longer. And the way that sin works is it always costs you more than you're willing to pay, and takes you to a place that you never thought you would go. So, but to the person, that is struggling with that, there's hope for you. But for one, where do you start? Where do you start?
Yep.
You got to tell somebody.
My next question, like, what for somebody who feels, because I've felt this way, where it's just like, I feel like I will never overcome this. Like, this is just always going to be something that I struggle with for the rest of my life. And like, and I'll go, and I can go like bouts of time of like, oh, okay, like I did really well, and then all of a sudden fall off, and then it's that thing of like, well, now that I've fallen, I might as well just like, just do it, because this is just, I guess, like something I'm never going to overcome. So somebody who's like in that space right now, who just feels a slave to it, who feels like it's kind of hopeless in a way of really, like, I've tried, what are some practical things that they can do, or maybe start that process to overcome it, or to like, at least, I don't know, like take your thoughts captive in a way?
Yeah. So I've got a 5-part training on this, and
great.
It's part of the organization that I'm a part of. It's called the P51 Project. It's based out of Psalm 51. But what I love about it is we start with this is why pornography is bad. And what I mean by bad, I don't mean, moral in a spiritual way. I mean, it's bad because it's bad for you neurologically, and there's significant, science behind that. And here's how it is a deteriorator and a corrupter of culture in this world. And this is how it points to sex trafficking, child pedophilia, like all this stuff. Like here is why it's not a good thing in spite of your theological view. And then, the journey is progressive. And it's like, well, how can you say something is truly bad if you don't understand where immorality comes from? But we go on this journey, and I love that part 4 is how you get free from it. And part 5 is how do you walk in newness of life? Can I actually never watch porn again? Is that possible? And what would that potentially look like? So that's the course. We'll definitely send it to you to link in the show notes.
Send it to us, and we'll link that in the show notes for sure.
But to answer your question, number one, you can only be as free as you're willing to be honest. And so at the beginning, it's like, man, I need to tell somebody. Because the thing that seems to be unmentionable to you, it will own you until you own it. And the way that you own it is you have to say it out loud. And I would also say, to the person that maybe I've done that and it doesn't work. Here's my pushback on that is that the level of your confession, the depth of your confession will equate to the level of your healing.
Mm.
Wow.
And here's what I mean. If I've been sitting in a circle with a group of men and someone said, I've been watching porn, and you nodded your head and me too, and you justified that as a confession, and you felt better about yourself, but nothing changed in your life, it's different to look someone in the eye and say, Thursday night, I typed this into my browser history, and this is what I put in the search bar, and I masturbated, and I felt terrible about it, and I even got a text from someone that I ignored while I was doing it. There was a sound that I heard that it made me think, is that God, or is that a distraction that I should stop? And I kept doing it anyway, and I felt terrible, and then I actually woke up at 1 a.m. and I did it again because I was in a hotel room and I didn't think anyone would know. When you say that, there's going to be a weight that comes off of you that you never felt before.
Wow.
So it's like, if you confess like that, something's going to come off of you. But Thomas Kempis talks about like habit must replace habit. So there's a void in we were insane to believe that if I have a 10-year porn addiction, I can fix it in 5 minutes or 30 days. It's insane. It's insane to think that. So, I need to tell someone, and then I need to take inventory of my life. And at the end of the day, more often than not, almost always, the fact that you're watching porn is either tied to a trauma, a wound, or a lack. In that the reason that you started watching porn, or the bond in which you have porn, the bond in which you have from watching porn came from there was someone who hurt you. Maybe you were exposed to it, as a child. There's something where you have this disordered view of sex or brokenness or something, and there's a root that's underneath this, there's this hurt or something that you haven't processed out loud with someone. And the porn is the Band-Aid that covers up the thing that you don't want to talk about. Because like porn's a problem, and there's real problems attached to the porn. But the porn is a Band-Aid over a deeper problem. And if I get to the root, I will actually stop desiring this fictitious form of intimacy. And what I've found is that most people that have a serious porn addiction, they don't have real community in their life, in that they might know a lot of people, but no one truly knows them. And I see this a lot, specifically in men's lives, where they've got a lot of buddies, but they don't have a friend. And so take inventory of your life, ask yourself some tough questions. And if you're like me, I'm an external processor. So for me, like I did a year of weekly counseling, and then I still do quarterly counseling. Every time if I speak at an event where I'm sharing my testimony, like in a deep, dark way, I know that's going to bruise me. I'm not ignorant to that. So I always process that with someone.
Wow.
So it's like, when do you fully get healed? You don't. You'll always be bruised, but to an extent, it's like I used to have a wound, but now I have a scar, and that scar tells a story, and that story points to a healer, and the healer's Jesus. But in the scar, there's still remembrance of the wound. So if the enemy will do any and everything he can to make you believe that, the limp that you still have, you have to always walk with, because you can't be healed. You need the bubbling up of the water. You need someone to put you in the water so you can be healed. No, you need to trust the man in which can only heal, that you are already healed, so that you can walk in the healing that he has for you. But the enemy wants to do everything you can to look back, look left, look right, look up, look anywhere other than forward, because the Bible tells us that it is finished. It is done. He's seated at the right hand of God because he's finished. So, I need to take inventory of my life, and then I need to get practical. If I find myself, because until you develop self-awareness, you can't be obedient. So is there a gym that I go to that I always see something that makes me think something that I go doing something, I go do something?
Yeah.
Is there TikTok, or is it Instagram? Is it a place? Is it a person? Is it a thing that is catalytic in my triggering? And then I do that thing. And I think the way to combat that is, number one, remove the trigger. but also I need a journal. And it's like, it's one thing to take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ. You know, I have a thought and that thought is going to take me to do a thing. So I'm going to take the thought captive and say, I'm not going to do the thing because I don't want to go to the place in which the thought takes me. But then there's the feeling that comes with that, because even if I don't do the thing, I'm still, wrestling with these emotions. And for me, like journaling was huge. Because again, the way that I process information, I don't know what I'm going to write until I write it. I don't know what I'm going to say until I say it. But there's something beautiful that happens in that if I've prayed, pondered, and paused before I do those things, because it's God that's with me and in me and for me, that is with me as I'm processing, because I'm not alone. So I would say that. So tell somebody, take inventory of your life, identify a trigger, remove that trigger, and then have accountability in your life. Like if you have any smart device, you should have covenant eyes, or at minimum, go to screen time, turn off, access to adult settings. And then for me, it's like, man, every like especially if you're in a relationship, multiple people should have your passwords, because that's just smart. And then when would you ever be someone that could potentially have a lapse in their integrity? Anyone. I guarantee if Peter would have taken a lie detector test when he said he would never deny Jesus, he would have passed. But guess what? He still did.
Wow. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's it. It's like, man, tell somebody, take inventory of your life, identify those triggers, remove them, and get accountability in your life. So to this day, I have a conversation with someone every Friday, and it's not just me saying things that, I did. Sometimes it's thoughts that I thought,
Right.
it's, because for some people, it's like, well, if you conquer one area of sin in your life, guess what? Satan's just going to move to, vertical number 2. It's like, okay, how can we use anger to kill, steal, and destroy his identity, allow a lapse, and maybe he didn't have the relationship with his dad that he wanted to have, and he feels inadequate about that. Maybe I can make him frustrated, and in his frustration he's going to take that out on his wife and kids. And it's like I never saw that coming, because I thought porn was my problem, and I don't watch porn anymore, but I find myself angry. Why am I angry? Because there's an enemy that wants to destroy you. It's why. So sorry for the 10-minute rant.
No. Seriously, that covered like what I wanted.
Yeah.
Like I wanted tangibleness, because I feel like sometimes we always try to approach, like there's importance to theology and all that, but then I think there's also there's so much importance of practical application for people to know, like, oh, this is how I do, and this is how I start. So I thought that was amazing, and thank you so much. Do you have anything else?
No.
Oh, I was just going to say also, it's like just so important to it's like pick up a hobby, learn, do a sport. Because like, obviously I'm going to tell you, get plugged into a local church, like serve, give, all that stuff. But it's like, man, you need to be in community, because you were created to exist in community. So like, if you find yourself in a season of, and I'm struggling mentally, I don't feel right, really ask yourself introspectively. It's like, again, like as the parents of, our kids are 6, 5, 3, and 1,
oh, wow.
So it's, we have all boys, and it's amazing, but like date nights are, far and few between sometimes.
Yeah, right.
We strategically, her mom like comes and stays with us a lot, and we're really plugged in our church and stuff like that. But like, you got to fight for connection with your spouse, and like make it a non-negotiable, and make community an important part of your life. Because if you run from community, like, you'll find yourself disconnected, and disconnection always leads to like disillusionment and discontentment. And it's like, man, there's something wrong, and I don't feel right. And it's because you're not doing something you were designed to do. And when you're not doing something you're designed to do, there's something in you that feels chaotic, and that's not a bad thing. That's actually God, like turning on your check engine light, saying, hey, you're doing something that's not good for you, and you need an attention in this area. So remember the joy that you found when you were doing these things.
That's so good. That's so good. I want to be respectful of your time. I just have one.
No, you're good. I'm playing golf in 22 minutes, so I'm good.
22 minutes. Okay, this is the last question, because we have a son now, and you have 4 sons. So as a parent, how do you approach talking to your sons, your daughters, about porn? Do you get ahead of it? How do you like, what's the best way to approach it where you're not just be like, porn is bad, don't. It's like, how do you approach it where they, there's only so much you can do, I'm sure. And then they have, and then it's kind of out of your hands, but what's the best way to kind of teach them, I guess, the destruction of it and why you don't and all that?
Yeah. Because in the same way, like if your kid was doing something that you didn't want them to do, and you tell them not to do that and you don't tell them what to do, they'll probably continue doing what you don't want them to do. So it's like we have to tell people what we want them to do. And I would say that the way that is applicable, that when we're talking about sex, like thinking about like, oh, do we need to talk to our kids about porn? Average age of exposure 3 years ago was 11 years old. Today is 8 years old. It was 11 years old because average age of a kid getting a smartphone was 11. But now so many kids have iPads or some kind of screen, even in elementary school, because because technology is a great thing, but because of the utilization of technology, the age in which people are getting exposed to things are lower and lower. So do we need to talk about these things? Yes. But I would say when you talk about sex in a way that's just true, it's like when we speak to our kids about sex or about stuff, it's like just speaking like definitive truths. There's so many times where like a school will be like, oh, well, I don't know if we want you to come in and talk to these kids about this. And what if what you say is triggering for them? Like, well, two things. Number one, they've already seen it. They already know everything I'm going to say. Right. The reality is you're uncomfortable, not them. You're not protecting them. You're uncomfortable, but that's okay, because like in the areas that we're not competent, we're often not confident. But if we're confident if we're confident about what we're talking about, we're going to be confident in what we say. So it's like, hey, sex is a beautiful thing. This is how every person that's on earth has gotten here. And it's like the other day, it's like we got 4 boys, and mom's missing a part that we all have. She's like, what's the deal with this? How do and we just tell, it's like, hey, this is a penis, this is a vagina. We don't make up words for it, because words matter. Words matter. It's like, for me, like, you'll never hear me say adult film industry instead of pornography because of two things. Number one, pornography is a word that's found in the Greek New Testament, porneia, and it's about, and it means the depiction of sexual imagery, meaning that it was in the same way it was on caves in Mesopotamia in 2000 BC. It's samely destructive to our heart on whatever website it might be. And when we call it the adult film industry, what are we saying? We're saying that it's for adults. So but we wouldn't agree to that. Like, is porn something that adults watch? So we just have to be careful what we say. So when we say, our kids, why can't a boy have a baby or whatever? It's like, well, there's a sperm and an egg, sperm's in daddy, eggs in mommy. When they meet, there's baby. Oh, okay. Moving on.
Yeah.
And then Cannon, our 6-year-old, he's almost 7. Like he'll probably have, a question that maybe is so complicated that I don't even have the answer for. But he knows the definitive truth. So it's like, and it's like when like we want to say, abbreviations, or like we don't want to call things what they are because we feel like we're trying to protect them or whatever. What we're doing is like, that is how like pedophiles groom kids. So it's like they'll try to say and do things that are, different than reality. So I just say, just call things what they are. And also, there's a really great book. It's called Good Book, Bad Pictures. My friend Kristen wrote it. It's been, I think it's like in its 20th year since it's been published, but it has a really great theme that is applicable to all people. But the book's demographic, age demographic is for 5 to 8 years old. And it says that, hey, there are private parts that should be private, but there are bad things that you might see that you shouldn't see in this world. And in the same way that if you're hurt, you come to mom and dad. If you're scared, you come to mom and dad. If you see something that you shouldn't see, you are not bad. What you saw was bad. Please come tell me so that we can process it. And I would say it's so important how you react. Because if your kid comes to you and say, such and such showed me this on this phone, if you freak out, the shame that you already feel, you're going to amplify.
Yep.
So how you react is going to set the tone for how that child comes to you with sensitive information for maybe the rest of their life. Again, I use that pause, pray, ponder for a lot of things. But if you need to take a second before you respond, but I would say it's like, hey, this is not something that we see. Because you saw it, that doesn't make you bad. Let's talk about this. So I'm just saying, like, that's the overarching truth. There are things that you ought not see in that way that are visible in this world. And if you see them, you are not bad, but it is a bad thing.
Yeah, that is so good.
Very good.
Yeah. And that's where shame, like, it's like the difference between guilt and shame. Shame is like, I am bad. Guilt is I did something bad. And that's very powerful. I'm a big believer in that of speaking to children like they're adults. And
because the reality is they will be. And if we always talk to our kids, just like if Abel, our 1-year-old, if we always talk to him in baby language, he would never learn to speak.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's so good. Well, thank you so much. This was so good, and I just really appreciate your time. We're going to split this. I think we're going to split this up into 2 parts. Just because there was so much meat in both. I really appreciate everything you shared and everything that you're doing. God's grace is on you, and because of that, if you're listening to this, God's grace can be on you and is on you, and whatever you've done, mistakes that you've done or what you have regretted, God can use that, and through you, you can be a vessel to impact so many people. Joshua, we'll leave you with this, but let people know how can people find out more about you and the things that you're involved. You have the floor here.
Yeah. So regarding social media, I am Joshua Broome on all social media platforms, and my website is the place that you can request me to speak in person or a podcast. And buy my book. So my book, 7 Lies That'll Ruin Your Life, that's all found on my website, which is joshuabroome.me. There's an E on the end of my last name also. So .me is my website. So that's kind of the one-stop shop. And then also that P51 project you can find, there's a resource tab on my website, and you can find that there as well.
And we'll link all of this in our show notes. Just for easy access. So thank you so much, Josh. We really appreciate it.
Very much. This was
Absolutely
just
was
so
a blast.
powerful.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you so much.
Bye, guys.